on. I can't see once all
35
of this is going. Good. Thank you, Chris, for starting the recording. This is the new California Purchase Agreement class. We have a couple people here sitting in the training room. Don't forget, everybody, that classes are now both. So you can welcome to come into the office and see them live, and or we'll keep doing them on Zoom. So
Can I ask a question?
Oh my gosh, really already? Yes, of course, Ellen.
In the training room, if I come and do it live, does everybody wear a mask in the training room?
No, but everybody's vaccinated or they wear a mask.
Okay.
Yeah, so the request is everybody's vaccinated and or wear a mask. The idea is for everyone just to be vaccinated at some point, but I don't know. That's a good question. At one point, Dan talked about that, so I don't know.
Yeah.
At this point, just everybody's vaccinated. All right, so before we get started, real quickly, in the chat box on your Zoom, I did put directions on how to find the RPA. Whoever's chatting back, I can't see it very well, so we'll have to deal with that in a moment. But there are directions in there. Basically, you're going to go to car.org. In the top left, you're going to hit Transaction Center. Once you do that, everyone can mute themselves, please. Once you do that, we end up somewhere.
Standard forms.
Standard forms. At that point, if you're not logged in, you'll be asked to log in. On the left, a little bit down, form revisions and new form releases. A couple lines down on the left, 2021 RPA draft. And then click here to view our RPA. Yeah, I don't know how to.
Could you mute everybody? Angel, can you please mute yourself? Thank you.
Yep, if everybody can mute themselves unless we are doing questions, and we're not there yet. So that will allow everybody to look at Angel saying he can't see it. I'm not sure why, but they are there. So again, car.org, Transaction Center on the top left, standard forms on the right about halfway down. That point, you should be asked to sign in. Excuse me, form revisions, new form releases on the left, partway down. 2021 RPA draft on the left, partway down, and then click here to view RPA. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time for everybody to figure out how to log in and do it. If you don't have a car login yet, if you're a new agent, don't have a car login yet, I don't think it'll let you in because you don't have a login.
Right, it won't.
So you guys will just follow along and we'll just take it from there. Yes, Demetra. You wanted to say something?
Oh, earlier, I just wanted to say too, there's going to be another class on the 17th. Jeff Kahn, our attorney, is teaching it at the board via Zoom. For board members, it's $25. For non-members, I believe it's $50. It's on the 17th from 1 to 5. Aaron and I have both taken the class, and it's very informative. So if you feel like you need another course once you're done with us, you're welcome to do that. CAR is also offering it. It's for more money. I think it's $75, but it does give you credit for education credit towards your renewing your license. Anyways, there's a lot of classes out there. Take advantage of all of them. Make a copy of it and read through it. If you're familiar with the RPA, it's just a different format. If you're brand new and not familiar with the RPA, you need to read it and study it and get familiar with it, because during your escrow, that is your, for lack of a better word, that is your Bible through your escrow. All the answers are in it. So if you come to me and say, Demetra, when do my contingencies expire? Where's your contract? Everything's in there. Okay, so get familiar with it, whether you're brand new or seasoned agent. Yes.
Do we need proof that we've taken some type of class regarding SAR or
No,
No,
the
we'll
proof will
all
be
know
when you
we
write the
talk with you.
offer.
Anyone who talks with you will know whether you know what you're talking about or not.
Okay, thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, no, keep going. So as Demetra said, for new agents, if anybody's a sports person, this is the rule book. Escrow is a neutral third party. The referees, the umpires don't care anything about the transaction, whether it goes through, doesn't go through, cancels, doesn't cancel, closes. They don't care. All they care about, all escrow cares about is that we're following the rules that are spelled out in our little rule book called California Residential Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instructions. So as Demetra said, when anybody's asking questions about what ifs and how comes and what's the timeline for this, that, or the other thing, then it's all spelled out in there. People are still trickling in. All right, so if you have never seen a residential purchase agreement before, this is the way it's always looked. Just pay attention, don't worry about it. For anybody who's using the current purchase agreement, this is not a huge departure in how we do business. It is really basically the same thing. It is just presented a little differently.
A lot differently.
A lot differently. I'm going to move around a little in our agreement. So the big part, and before we get into details, the big thing that people are going to notice, if you are used to the current agreement, you start on page 1 and you flip through the pages, and as you go through the pages, you start filling in the blanks. If everyone could mute themselves, please. So as you go through page after page after page, you're filling in the blanks, the number of days, you've got the defaults, you're changing things. The big departure here is all of the fill in the blanks, all of the timelines are all spelled out in what is being affectionately called the grid. So we start with what the property is and who the agents are at the top of page 1, and then we jump right into the grid. It's all paragraph 3. It's all paragraph 3. And then it goes through. So we've got 3 pages, 2.5, 3 pages of the grid.
3 pages of paragraph 3.
So the basic difference in how this works is when you are looking at the grid, you fill in the blanks, and we'll go through the blanks on here. You fill in the blanks, and then the paragraph within the contract that then references is what's, I'm using the wrong mouse here, is what's marked in this paragraph. So as example, if we were to look at D1, our initial deposit, if someone has questions about what D1 is, we would look at paragraph 5A. And so 5A.
Scroll down to 5A1.
So we find paragraph 5A1. And then in paragraph 5A1 is talking about our initial deposit. But there's no fill in the blanks in the paragraph 5A1. In paragraph 5A1s, it has, if you want to know what this number is, or what the number of days are, or what we're talking about, where the fill in the blank portion of it, we have to go back to paragraph 3D1, which is our grid.
Keep going, keep going.
We're figuring this all out. All right. And then here is paragraph 3D1. And now we're talking about initial deposit. So that's the biggest difference in sort of the functionality of this, is instead of looking at paragraph 5A1 and having the fill in the blank there, the fill in the blank is here on the front page, and you have to go back and forth between the two to like cross-reference each other. So functionally, in terms of how you're filling out an RPA and whatnot, that's really the biggest difference. And then after that, we have some slight changes in there. So do we have questions on the functionality of this? If so, unmute yourself, please. No. Okay, I'm going to go home now. I'm done. There's no questions.
Everybody's got it. So let's go to paragraph 3A. 3A is the purchase price, right at the top of the grid. So the purchase price, go over to the right, purchase price, and then the spot, that's where you're gonna put what we're offering. The next box, we check it if it's all cash. Okay, then B, close of escrow. Close of escrow. Terms and conditions, we go to that and it says 30 days after acceptance or on a specific date, just how it was in the original, in the last RPA. Joey,
Yeah, so basically, it's like all of the details of the offer that you would enter, as opposed to in different sections, it's all in this paragraph 3A.
which is 3 pages,
Right,
yes,
and then all the explanations for everything is just.
back in the contract.
Correct.
Okay, thanks for coming, Joey.
And yeah, and so I think ultimately, once we all get used to it, that's going to be fantastic
Yeah.
because as an agent, understanding, because we will all understand what all these paragraphs mean. So instead of having to flip through pages and pages of, well, where is it? Okay, it's here somewhere. Almost all you need are the first 3 pages of an offer, and you can just go back and forth because that's all you care about. So yes, functionally, I think it's going to be fantastic for agents. There is some new language in here also, which I think is very good, but yeah, 100%.
Okay,
I see chats in the chat box. I can't read it well. So if you have questions in there, unmute yourself and you can
Hi,
come now.
everyone. This is Bali. I have a quick question. So
Sure.
if we have like how do you call it? In the CAR, when we have templates, if we still have the templates, will they apply to the new RPA, or will we have to manually input everything over again, or how does that work?
Yeah, good question. We don't know. So far, and thank you because we jumped right in. So far, the only document we have is the standalone RPA. Presumably, it will also come like our current RPA. You'll get the Fair Housing Act, you'll get the PRBS, you'll get the AD, all of those extra documents
should be incorporated.
will likely be a part of this when you load this and start doing it. 25 bucks. But we don't know because so far this is all we have. Presumably also, you will, for templates, I don't know if you'll have to delete out the current RPA and then reload it with the new RPA so that your template is now current, or if it will just automatically switch over to the new RPA. We don't know yet.
We don't know. Carr can't tell us. The attorneys that wrote this can't tell us. So it's kind of a wait and see. When it comes live, we'll know then.
Presumably, it will be very similar to the current RPA where, especially with the financing and stuff, you just put in bits and pieces of it and it'll auto-populate the other parts of it. Same thing, when you're identifying the property on the top of the page, that'll automatically populate through all the other pages. But nobody sees any reason why that functionality won't continue to be the case going forward. But until it auto-populates until it happens in CAR forms, zip forms, we don't actually know for sure. And in terms of a date, mid-December, second week December is the best guess.
Ish.
Yeah. Nobody knows. We haven't been able to get firm information yet whether or not there's going to be any notice. Hey, next week the new RPA is going into effect, or if one day you're going to log into CAR and just suddenly the new RPA is going to be there. Nobody knows. If you've written an offer prior to this going live on the existing RPA, you won't need to void that and rewrite. That will still continue. Your life will be a little confusing because there are some different language pieces in each one. So until whatever that deal is closes out, there'll be a little bit of confusion, I'm sure, in your head. Did I answer your question? Any other questions?
You did, thank you.
Hey, Aaron, this is
Sure.
Santa here.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to chime in real quick and mention I'm taking a class, community college class, and they had mentioned that in addition to the RPA changing, that they have to make minor tweaks to, I think he said something like 90 other forms that are just kind of ancillary ones. Have you heard anything about that?
I'm sure as we go through this, you'll see there's some additional language that's been added to here. Things are referenced slightly differently. So I have absolutely no doubt that there are going to be a whole bunch of other forms they're going to have to tweak. Are all of those forms going to be tweaked mid-December when this goes live, or is that something that they'll work on over the next 6 months? We still don't know. When this goes live, for sure, I think anytime there's any of those, especially if it's a not commonly used extra form that gets added in, make sure you read it and make sure that the language is working with each other. Yeah, I have no doubt that that's the case, but we don't have any info on that specifically.
Thank you, Aaron.
To that point, we have been told that now the RPA, as you find it in CAR, is what we're going to see. There are no more major edits going to happen to it. There may be some edits for punctuation or spelling or things like that, but no major verbiage or paragraph changes going forward that we.
So this should be pretty, this copy should be pretty much
So
what we're gonna
what
get.
you're looking at now should be, we printed these yesterday, so these should be what it looks like. Any other questions? Fantastic. All right, keep going, Demetra. You're on expiration of offer.
Expiration of offer, 3 calendar days after all buyers' signature, just as it was on the other RPA, okay? So 3 calendar days, and you can put a specific date for the expiration. And you could, it's at 5 o'clock, or you can put a specific time. Initial deposit amount. The 3%. You can put the dollar amount, or you can put the percentage of the purchase price.
And we don't know. So the percentage there is new. So we don't know if you can just put 3% and it'll change
And
the
it'll calculate
dollars,
it
or
for
if you
you.
have
We
to
don't
put
know.
dollars and it'll tell you what the percentage is. Again, that's has nothing to do with the attorneys. That has nothing to do with people writing the forms. That has to do with CAR forms and the tech people in there. So nobody has an answer yet.
Right. Because right now, how it automatically adds and subtracts for you, that column, I'm assuming it'll do the same here, but until it goes live, we won't see it. You remember the days that it didn't? We had to calculate it ourselves. That was fun.
And I would recommend when this first goes live that everybody double check math, because even if it's automatically calculating, there could be, glitches. So everybody's going to have to pay attention initially.
An initial deposit amount on the right-hand side, additional terms within three or blank business days after acceptance up. Yeah. So that hasn't changed either. It's 3 business days for the initial deposit. All the rest of the days in the contract are calendar days, but the initial deposit is business days. Okay, that hasn't changed. Then the next one, increased deposit, we don't use that a lot. We're going to leave that blank, but it's the same as how it was in the other RPA, in the original RPA. Loan amount.
One change here, the loan amount is it defaults now. Fixed rate, it defaults here, buyer to pay 0 points.
Yes.
So that's new language. Currently, it just leaves the blank whether or not there are points, but it doesn't specifically say 0 points. So this is new language that the default are 0 points.
This I love. So, but up above it, so what is the loan amount? We put it up there. And they have an option for a percentage. So if it's an 80-20, you'd put 80% of this, the loan amount. Again, not sure how that's gonna, if they're gonna calculate that for you. We're gonna have to play with it once it comes live. And then over on the right, conventional or FHA, VA, seller financing or other.
And again, I'm going to just do this one more time, just so everybody's clear. So all this loan amount is relating to paragraph 5C1. So if anybody has questions as to what the details are on that, here's paragraph 5C and 1, and we're talking about this here. Loan will provide conventional financing unless FHA, VA, seller financing checked. And then it says, you're curious what the dollar amounts are, look at paragraph 5E1.
Really quick, if you were doing, hi guys, this is Matt. If you guys were doing Or if we were doing creative financing such as subject to or something like that, that's, you would check other and put, and just write that there, correct?
I'm not sure what subject to is for your creative financing, but yes, other than financing you find here, then you would want to figure out what this other is. And you
Okay.
want to define that. Liability wise, be careful if you're going to go down that route, but yes.
Okay.
Okay, then what do we have next? Additional finance amount. That would be if there's, we used to see a lot of seconds. So there'd be a first, maybe a 90% first, a 10% second, and 10% down.
And you still get those with like CalFA loans,
Yeah, we
CalFHA loans
still
and
see
stuff.
those,
There's still
not
some of those around.
not as often, but yeah. So, but there is a spot for that. So if it does apply, then you'll fill that out. Occupancy type. Primary occupancy or secondary or investment. This too is new.
Secondary investment right now, it just is, it's either owner occupied or not.
Or non-owner
And
occupied.
now they're specifying secondary or investment. Secondary, the idea is that's going to be a vacation home. Investment, that's going to be just.
You rent out.
You're renting it out.
Mhm.
My recommendation is you check with the lender with your loan approval letter and see what they are considering this property that you're writing an offer on.
Okay, balance of down payment. Hopefully that'll auto fill for us. Or we have to get our calculators out.
Right.
And then our total purchase price.
Okay.
Again, just like in the old contract, the buyer and sellers both initial the bottom of each page.
Questions so far?
Yeah, if you do on section A, if it is an all cash offer, I'm assuming you would leave D1 and 2, or excuse me, D2, you would leave D2 and E1 blank, correct?
Correct. There's no
Correct.
financing.
And similarly to how things happen now, I would not doubt at all if you were to check the all cash box that all the others kind of gray out, you can't even fill them in.
Yeah,
We don't
probably
know
won't
for
allow you
sure,
to.
but my guess is that's how it's gonna be, something to that effect. Right, any other questions at
On
the
page
first part
one.
of the grid, page 1?
We got through page 1.
Got through page 1, it only took us 20 minutes, that's not bad. All right, moving along.
Hopefully the property address will autofill and the date up at the top. I can't imagine it wouldn't if we're updating all the time. So what's our first paragraph? Seller credit, if any, to the buyer. So if we're writing the offer, this you see mainly with
VA.
maybe like VA or first-time offers, first-time buyers. They have the credit, they have the income, but maybe they don't have a bunch of money saved. So they want help with, they want to basically finance their closing costs. So they can ask the seller, we're going to offer full price, but we want the seller to pay $5,000 towards our closing costs. This is where you'd ask for it.
Right, or if it's a VA loan, there are certain requirements that the buyer cannot pay for certain closing costs. So get with the lender, find out what the estimate is of that, and then calculate that out.
Okay.
G2, additional financing terms, that's same as what's in there now. It's whatever your creative financing is, dogs included, or whatever. It's
Can
happened
you say a
before.
car?
Cars
There you
included,
go.
cats included.
There, that's fine.
Yeah, we're okay with that. All right,
G2?
Yeah.
What are you gonna say, like a kid from the parent?
Not necessarily. That's something you're going to deal with the lender in terms of like a gift letter and they're getting money towards their down payment. Additional finance terms. I mean, that's a catch-all. That's if you couldn't come up with any of the other paragraphs to throw it in there, that would be that creative financing. We're doing something really weird that nobody's heard of
Normally in
before.
the older contract for additional financing terms, that's where I would put seller to pay buyer's closing costs not to exceed $5,000. But in this new purchase agreement, we have its own little category right above it. So if there's something else, what else? I'm not sure what else there would be, but I'm sure we'll think of something.
Yeah.
If we need an extra spot, we have one right there.
Right.
Verification of all cash.
So this is a little different. We now have 3 lines to talk about what the verification is. And so whether if it's an all cash offer, if it's down payment and closing costs, and then the verification of a loan application. So between the verification of all cash, verification of down payment, closing costs, obviously cash offer versus a financed offer, there's the big difference there. Here's another change. The default is that it is attached to the purchase agreement. Currently, the default is it'll come within 3 days after acceptance, but now the default is that it's attached. Or you can check the box for other things. Okay, and that's separate lines for whether it's an all cash offer or whether or not it's financed. And again, to your all cash offer, you check the box. I'm assuming one will gray out or the other one, but again, we don't know for sure. Verification of loan application, again, the default has changed to that it's attached, and
This
in the
is all
additional
new.
terms, it's not just a letter. You've got to find out what kind of letter you have in your hand that you're providing. Is it a pre-qualification letter? Is it a pre-approval letter? Is it a fully underwritten pre-approval letter? So you're gonna have to get on the phone with your lender if you don't know who you're dealing with.
I love
Right?
It's fantastic.
it. People get pre-qual and pre-approval mixed up all the time.
Correct. I don't know where the liability might be on that if you were to check the wrong box.
Right.
Time will tell. I do definitely recommend, especially there are a lot of letters that come from lenders now. They use all sorts of wording to make it sound like, you know, it's a fully underwritten, reviewed pre-qualification letter with an approval. Right, you know, and so what is it? I don't know, but so I recommend you find out from the lender you're working with what exactly you're holding in your hand. And they're gonna have to figure that out. I'm assuming that's gonna change a little bit what some of the letters are that are coming as this trickled down. And again, I think this is a fantastic checkbox to have, and it really is just, you know, for clarity for everybody. And by the way, for especially with new agents and you're talking with new clients, you're trying to qualify buyers and they're apprehensive of getting with a lender and knowing exactly what they have. You know, I logged onto a website and I clicked on something and here's my letter. Use this to make sure that they actually are approved or fully underwritten, and let them, you know, this is a great talking point to explain why that's important.
Obviously, a fully underwritten pre-approval would be the best one to get. So it'll make your offer that much stronger.
Final verification of condition, 5 days prior to close of escrow, or you can change it.
Let's click on paragraph 16.
Let's click on paragraph 16. Okay, hold on. Playing Jeopardy music. Bear with me.
All right. Oh. Paragraph 16.
Right here.
Final verification of condition. Buyers shall have the right to make a final verification of property condition within the time specified in paragraph 3J, not as a contingency of the sale, but to solely confirm that the property is maintained. So it's just like the old contract. Okay? That's all. Just an example of how to go find what the final verification of condition is.
Demetra just wanted to make me scroll around.
I do.
know.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Well, the final verification, does the house have to be already vacant? That's it?
No,
No.
it does not have to be vacant. The final verification is to see, one, that the property is in the condition it was when we wrote the offer. The seller didn't let the pool turn green and didn't put holes in the walls and tear the carpet up, right? Two, if we did a request for repairs and asked them to fix A, B, and C, and they'd agreed to that those were fixed. Three, it's a great opportunity for the buyer and seller to get together. And the seller, you know, the buyer might say, when's trash day? Can we have the number for your pool man? And how do you turn on the pool light? The switch is over here, you know, just for them to get, you know, teach them the ins and outs of the house.
Yeah, it can be a really great feel good, like handing the house over, especially for a house that somebody's lived in for a long time and there is a lot of personal possessions in the house. It's also a great time to make sure that there's evidence of people
They're
packing.
boxing that things up.
I mean, if you can barely even walk into the room, it's just so full of personal possessions, and 3 days before the close of escrow, nothing has moved. You might want to ask some questions about whether they really plan on being out of the house.
Okay,
Okay, another big one. Here is a huge change. Drum roll, please, somebody. Thank you. I love having a peanut gallery. Assignment request. And you have a certain number of days. The default is 17 days.
Excuse
So-
me, where are you on the contract?
We are on page 2 in the grid. So this is all paragraph 3 in the grid. And we're top third of the page, subparagraph K.
Right after the final verification of condition.
Yep. So this is right below the second grayed out dark line that says intentionally blank. So K, assignment request. And this references paragraph 23. So let's scroll to paragraph 23. This is a change. Okay, Demetra, take it.
I'm not reading all that. Paragraph 23, assignment. Buyer shall have the right to assign all of buyer's interests in this agreement to buyer's own trust or to any wholly owned entity of buyer that is an extension at the time of such, that is in existence at the time of such assignment.
Otherwise, buyer shall not assign all or any part of buyer interest in this agreement without first having obtained the separate written consent of seller to a specified assignee. Such consent shall not be unreasonably withheld. Prior to any assignment, buyer shall disclose to seller the name of the assignee and the amount of any monetary consideration between buyer and assignee. Buyer shall provide assignee with all documents related to this agreement, including, but not limited to, the agreement and any disclosures. If assignee is a wholly owned entity or trust of buyer, that assignee does not need to re-sign or initial all documents provided. Whether or not an assignment requires seller's consent, at the time of assignment, assignee shall deliver a letter from assignee's lender that assignee is pre-qualified or pre-approved as specified in paragraph 6B. Should assignee fail to deliver such a letter, seller, after first giving assignee a notice to buyer to perform, shall have the right to terminate the assignment. Buyer shall, within time specified in paragraph 3K, deliver any request to assign this assignment for seller's consent. If buyer fails to provide the required information within this time frame, seller's withholding of consent shall be deemed reasonable. Any total or partial assignment shall not relieve buyer of buyer's obligations pursuant to this agreement unless otherwise agreed by seller. So this is a huge change in assignees, right? Bob Smith or assignee. Well, you now have 17 days to identify who the assignee is, and the seller has the right to talk about it. Ooh, crickets. Questions?
Aaron, I got a question.
Go ahead.
This one would be about G1, a little above, and similar ones for the terms and conditions. There's a checkbox, and it has the dollar amount, and then to the right of it, it says in parentheses, percent of purchase price, number above is for calculation purposes, and it's not a contractual term. So for G, right there, yeah. And so for this one, obviously the important term is the dollar amount. Do you even have to put in the percentage there? And then what if the percentage ends up being a little bit, less than 3% or more than 3%, or it's kind of like a big long number, like 2.9888 or whatever? I mean, to what extent do we need to fill this form out completely like that? How would we do that?
Good question. I don't know. And I'm assuming that the two are going to cross-reference each other. I'm assuming the percentage there is to make it easier for realtors who don't know how to operate a calculator. So when you talk with your clients and they're going to put and where this is really going to come in is with your loan amounts and your initial deposits and stuff, right? So I'm doing my initial deposit, we're going to do 3%. How do I calculate that, right? So I think what you're going to be able to do is just put 3% in here and it'll tell you the dollar amount.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa. Same with your loan amount. It's an 80-20 loan. We're putting 20% down. We're gonna borrow 80%. So you're gonna be able to just put 20 in here or the dollar amount and it'll cross-reference. To your question of, if especially like with the seller credit, if I'm asking for a seller credit of $5,326.32, and that is 0.086321938% of the purchase price or something, don't have an answer for you. I don't.
We
we'll
won't
have to
know
wait-
until
we'll
it
have to
goes
wait and
live.
see.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think that cross-reference, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions about assignments?
Yes, I have a question. In order to utilize the change of assignee within 17 days, do they have to write the contract with an entity and or assignee? Or if they just put in an entity without saying and or assignee, they still have that right?
That's a great question. I believe that the way this language is written, that we are writing into the contract. The way I read it, Demetra can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's now being written into the contract that the buyer does have the right to assign the contract to somebody else within the number of days specified here, the default being 17 days. However, if the assignee is not a wholly owned entity of the buyer, a trust or an LLC, right? So I'm buying the building and I'm putting it into my LLC that I already have. That's where I hold all my buildings.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. I still have to disclose it, but everyone can just see that's what I'm doing. If, however, I'm buying this house and I'm going to put it into an LLC that Demetra and I both own, that has to be, we have to let the seller know about that, and the seller has the right to review those documents and see what's going on. And it's also being put in here that if Demetra is paying me to have her put this in here, that has to be disclosed. And the idea is we want to make sure the seller has the right to know if I'm buying the house and I'm not even going to own it, I'm immediately just assigning it to Demetra and I've made $100,000 on that, seller has a right to know.
That makes sense.
So I don't believe you have to put assignee in there because that right is now being written in here. However, we're also adding to that the seller has some rights regarding assigning things. Is that how you read it also? Were there other questions regarding assigning?
Hi, I have a question. This is Magdalena. So I work with LLC, and usually what we wrote as a contract was like, let's say, Metro Capital and or assignee, and then the name of the person who will be signing for documents. How do I write it now if it's the entity that it's purchasing it?
So again, I believe you can just have it be written
The same way.
yeah, this, you could do the same way. The difference is if it's going, so the big, if you were to just write John Smith and John Smith is going to assign it to the John Smith Trust or the John Smith LLC, not a big deal. If you want to write John Smith or assignee, and then it's going to go to John Smith's LLC, still not a big deal. The big change even in that, however, is we have to identify who the assignee is, and we have to disclose to the seller the terms of that assigning, whatever is being changed in there, within the number of days specified here. So the default is 17 days. So within 17 days, we have to disclose to the seller the assignee is, whatever the name is, and here are the terms of how that assignment worked. It's John Smith's company. He's owned it for 30 years. He just wants to hold his property in that. Now the seller then can't really, we have to disclose it to the seller. The seller doesn't have much to say about how that works. However, if it's an LLC that John Smith just created during the escrow period of this property, and it's not wholly, if there's that, and or it's not wholly owned by John Smith, then this all needs to be disclosed to the seller so the seller knows what is going on.
So is that a verbal disclosure or is there a form there?
There are no verbal disclosures.
There's no verbal disclosures. At this point, there is not a disclosure form that I'm aware of that needs to be presented. So this would be, you're going to write an email, you're going to type something up, and you're going to say, John Smith's going to assign it to the John Smith Trust. There's been zero compensation to John Smith for this beyond whatever, and this is what we're doing. Everybody says, great. If John Smith says the assignee is Demetra KAlivas, and Demetra has paid John Smith $100,000 more for the property than John Smith is paying for it, all of that has to be given to the seller, and now there's a conversation.
I would imagine that would be in an addendum.
I would
form.
imagine it's an addendum. I would imagine that there will be a CAR form for it, but there isn't as of yet. Did I answer your question? I don't know
Yeah.
whose question that was, but did I answer it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, contingencies, because that is a big change. Any other questions regarding assigning? Okay, that's it. Perfect. All right, so contingencies. We've broken down the contingencies a little differently. There are a few extra ones in here, how it's spelled out. The big, huge difference now is all the contingencies here have a default of 17 days. So that's the major departure. The default is 17 days.
For loan, for appraisal, for everything.
So that is now the default for everything. I guess the committee that was writing this form decided it was too confusing to have different contingency time periods for the different contingencies. So they just decided to make them all the same. So, so that is the big, huge departure in it. Other than that, our contingencies are, we've got a couple different added ones covering the same basic things. They're just separated. Loan contingency, appraisal contingency. And is that a good time to go talk? Well, let's go through all of these and we'll come back to that. Okay,
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
of course.
After the new form comes out, inevitably, we will receive offers on the old form. What does one do if you get an offer on the old form after the new form has come out?
You can accept it. You could. So if it's the day that that the new form comes out, okay, so it was actually probably written the day before and, whatever. If it's a week or two after the new form comes out, or whenever, you can still accept an offer on the old RPA. You could also ask that it be rewritten on the new RPA.
Yeah, just like when it's been revised in the past, Ellen, there's been times I've had handwritten ones that were 3 revisions ago. And I'm sorry, but I need this done on the most current revised RPA. So yeah, like he said, if it's right at the beginning when it's in December and mid-December, I would accept the old one. But as time goes on, especially the more comfortable we get with this, I think eventually we're all going to love it. I hope. Then you definitely, as a listing agent, can request that they rewrite it on the current RPA.
For me personally, Ellen, and again, this comes from a place where Demetra and I have been taking the classes and discussing and flipping through the new RPA for the last few weeks. I am fairly quickly going to push people to use the new RPA. I do think there's a lot of great language in here that makes the whole transaction more clear for everybody. So I do think there's a lot of good stuff in this.
No, I don't disagree. It's just that I know based on past experience, some guy who's a loan broker or, is going to use the old RPA 6 months after the new ones come out. So I just wondered what my obligation is.
So we asked that question of Jeff and he said that you can still accept it on the old RPA. I
Doesn't
mean,
mean we have to.
Doesn't mean you have to. I mean, again, if we're talking a day or two after the new one comes out, that's different. If you're talking a few weeks later, I mean, my inclination would be to push for the new RPA. However, I'm going to read the terms of what the offer is. And if I think that using that old RPA is benefiting my seller, then
Accepted.
I will, why not accept it? But you can still accept the old RPA.
Okay, thank you.
At some point, are they going to say no longer? Probably, but at this point, that's not, there's no date that's been given to us for that.
Would it help if you put it like you say?
Thank you.
Grand MLS noise, you require for the funds and everything you need to. you say
Offers to
last
be
week.
submitted on the current.
Yeah, like after the first couple of weeks, you could do that on the private remarks. Please submit offers to this email address. Please use new RPA dated, whatever. Sure.
I mean, if they go on car forms, that's the only one they're gonna have access to. But if they printed some and, and.
Or saved
had
it as a
them-
PDF on their computer and they
Yeah.
just print off of that
Yeah.
or whatever.
Otherwise, they won't
Sure.
have access to it on car forms.
Yep. All right, so for our contingencies, again, everything's defaulting to 17 days. And we've separated some of our contingencies. So we've got a loan contingency, appraisal contingency, investigation of property contingency, informational access to properties, so that's to get in so that they can get in and do their investigation. Review of seller documents is now separated. Preliminary title report separated. Common interest disclosures. Review of least liened items. And of course, we can still add in the contingency sale of buyer's property. Okay, so we've separated out some of this from the buyer's side in terms of just buyer investigations. We've separated them as different contingencies. Someone asked earlier about ancillary forms updating. Well, one of the forms that's going to have to get it updated is the contingency release form, where we make sure that it jives with how these contingencies are all written out.
Can we go to 8B, the appraisal
Yeah.
contingency?
Here's
There's a
another big
change.
departure. This is another big change, paragraph 8B. Okay, and we're going to start actually with 8A as it
Where
relates
are
to
we on the contract? What? Okay, I see. Never.
5.
Paragraph 8.
So we're going to actually start with 8A1 before we talk specifically about appraisal. Do you want me to read?
You
Is
want
that
to read
easier?
loan and I'll read appraisal. How's
Yeah.
that?
So we're going to talk. So here we go. I'm just going to read paragraph 8A1, contingencies and removal of contingencies, loans. This agreement is, unless otherwise specified in paragraph 3L1, and again, referencing back to the grid, or an attached CR form, contingent upon buyer obtaining the loan or loans specified. If contingent, buyer shall act diligently and in good faith to obtain the designated loan or loans. And this is new language, and it is in bold. If there is no appraisal contingency, or the appraisal contingency has been waived or removed, then failure of the property to appraise at the purchase price does not entitle buyer to exercise the cancellation right pursuant to the loan contingency if buyer is otherwise qualified for the specified loan and buyer is able to satisfy lender's non-appraisal conditions for closing the loan.
This is going to be huge.
This is going to be huge because I
That is
know that
huge.
I know that there are agents that just say, hey, we're going to make our offer look better. We're going to waive our appraisal contingency up
Don't
front,
worry, if we don't get
but
the
don't
loan.
worry if it
yeah.
doesn't appraise, we'll just figure out how to make the lender turn around and say that, oh, we can't get the loan. So the fact that this is specifically stated, the fact that this is in bold means that this is common practice and the DRE wants to end it.
We have to act in good faith.
Now,
So if it doesn't appraise and you've waived your appraisal, contingency, then you need to move forward.
So before we do questions, let's now read our appraisal contingency. You want me to keep reading or do you want
Okay,
to
yeah,
read
go
it?
ahead. You're so good at it.
So now we're back, paragraph 8B, the actual appraisal. This agreement is, unless otherwise specified in paragraph 3L2 or attached CR form, contingent upon written appraisal of the property by a licensed or certified appraiser at no less than the amount specified in paragraph 3L2, without requiring repairs or improvements to the property. Appraisals are often a reliable source to verify square footage of subject property. However, the ability to cancel based on the measurements provided in the appraisal falls within the investigation of property contingency. No big deal there, nothing huge difference. The appraisal contingency is solely limited to the value determined by the appraisal. For any cancellation based on this appraisal contingency, buyer shall deliver a copy of the written appraisal to seller upon request by seller. And then paragraph 2, no appraisal contingency. If no appraisal contingency is checked in 3L2, then buyer may not use the loan contingency specified to cancel this agreement if the sole reason for not obtaining the loan is that the appraisal relied upon by the buyer's lender values the property at an amount less than that specified. If buyer is unable to obtain the loan solely for this reason, seller may be entitled to buyer's deposit or other legal remedies. It is in here in multiple places. So guess what agency is going to be very, very serious about not letting cancellations happen because it didn't appraise? Questions? You had a question, Joey.
Well, I've answered it. So don't check that box.
Can I interject?
Right, unless your buyer is willing to pay above appraised value, don't remove the appraisal contingency.
That's it.
And they need to,
And able.
yeah, be able to.
Correct.
Yes, go ahead.
I've had 3 deals this year with, well, I've had many with no appraisal contingency, but 3 in particular where the agent attempted to renegotiate the price after the property did not appraise. And they had no qualms about doing, well, it didn't appraise. I said, then you shouldn't have removed the appraisal contingency. Just pointing that out. People try to do that all the time.
Right, and where they've been trying to hold people over a barrel on that is, you know, well, we'll cancel. You'll have to disclose that the appraisal to other people, and they're just doing their best to try and squeeze you on it. And there is now language in the RPA that is basically saying, we're not playing that game anymore.
Yeah, I had a listing where the buyer's agent removed the appraisal contingency. And when it didn't appraise, she said, well, we just won't get our loan. We still have our loan contingency. And it's like, oh, did I school her? But yeah, it's really frustrating. So I'm thrilled to see this in here.
And by the way, there's now written in here, if you as the listing agent think that that's what's going on, seller has the right to request a copy of the appraisal.
Right. In the past, it's always like the buyer, I paid for it, that report's mine. I'm not giving it to you. Now it's in here, they have to. If it
Okay,
doesn't
now I
appraise.
believe it only says you have to if we're trying to cancel,
Yeah. And the seller requests it.
and then the seller has to request it. So they don't have to automatically turn it over to you.
Yeah, but frequently it really is under the purchase price. And that's when they, in the past, have attempted to renegotiate the price and looked at me like I had rocks in my head when I said no.
Right. Now, again, to be clear, the seller does have a right to request the appraisal. And I'll read the language again, for any cancellation based on the appraisal contingency.
right.
So it's for the cancellation, we have the right to see it. So we're keeping the two, we're separating the two contingencies. An appraisal contingency and a loan contingency are now absolutely independent of each other.
So they can still try to renegotiate the price, but
They
can't
can.
cancel it.
They can try to renegotiate, but they can't cancel it because of it.
Yeah, good question. Any other questions regarding that? Okay, I think we'll just end after possession because we're gonna be right at around noon. So let me scroll back up.
Who's possessed?
Who's
I
possessed?
have a question, if I may.
Please.
Sure.
Hello, everyone.
Hi,
So technically, this boils down to having only two contingencies on which you can pull back, and that is the appraisal and the inspection contingency. Is that correct?
Loan.
No, you can, you have your loan contingency, you have your appraisal contingency, if that's open. You have your buyer investigation contingency, review of
So
seller
for-
disclosures.
And
So
the
you have
FOIL,
common interest disclosures, you have the title.
Well, okay,
And
but as
HOA
far as
bond.
the loan goes, basically that is something that is directly related to the lender not approving you. No longer like if you remove the appraisal contingency, like what you just went over, someone can cancel the loan, someone can cancel the deal because of the appraisal, even though it's removed.
So what we're separating are the two pieces. So if you've written an offer on $1 million property and it's an 80-20 loan, so 20% down, we're financing 80%.
Mm-hmm.
And the property appraises at 950. The game that's been played is that, well, we're not going to get a loan because it only appraised at 950. That's what we'll just tell the listing agent is we couldn't get our loan and we'll just sort of figure out how to get out of the deal or try to renegotiate the price. What the new language is saying is in that same situation, we've got an 80-20 loan on $1 million property, and then the appraisal came back at 950. If you were to try and get out of that deal and say it didn't appraise, if you don't have an appraisal contingency in place, you can't then turn around and say, well, I can't get my loan. The seller has the right to say, well, do you still qualify for 20% down, 80% financing on $1 million house? And if the answer is yes, you as the buyer still qualify for all of that, then it's not the seller's problem that the house only appraised at 950. If you've waived the appraisal contingency.
Yeah.
That's been waived up front, then you still qualify for the loan. The fact that the house didn't appraise isn't the seller's problem if the appraisal contingency has been waived. So in that case, the earnest money is potentially in jeopardy.
Jeopardized, yeah. What if it's
And
the
let
opposite?
me-
What
let me
if
say
it's
th-
the opposite
go ahead.
scenario? What if the house appraised for $1.1 million?
Doesn't affect it.
That doesn't affect it. And
Congratulations, you have equity in the house.
yeah, congratulations. Generally speaking, my experience with appraisals is it's a pass fail. It either appraises
At value.
or it doesn't appraise. It came in at less under value. It's
And I-
very uncommon for it to come in and say, sweet, you're buying this $1 million house, this $1.1 million house for $1 million.
What I meant, I'm so sorry. What I meant is like it went for a lower value, like not 950, which is so close to the selling price, but it went for like 850, let's say.
So if the appraisal contingency is in place,
No,
it has not been waived. Yeah, if it has not been waived and it is in place, then the buyer has the right to turn around to the seller and say, wow, I thought this was $1 million house, but my bank doesn't think it's $1 million house. And we can try and renegotiate and find common ground, or the buyer could say, sorry, I'm looking for $1 million house. If the appraisal contingency has been waived and we have that situation,
Yeah.
okay, if the buyer qualifies at $1 million purchase price for an 80-20 loan, and that's what's been written in here, the fact that the house appraised for 800,000, not the seller's problem.
Right.
If the buyer says, yes, I still qualify for the 80-20 loan at $1 million, but I don't have $200,000 extra to throw into to close the deal, not the seller's problem.
Whether it appraises $1,000 under or $100,000, if you don't have an appraisal contingency, you can't back out because of the appraisal. No matter.
as of now, you still could, but.
No, you
going-
can't. No,
No.
as of right now, the rules haven't changed. The wording in the contract has changed.
Correct.
The
Yeah.
rules have not changed. If you read the current RPA, I'm getting excited here. If you read the current RPA, and I do have it here, I just don't have time to find exactly where it is, but look under appraisal. And they're separate. If you waive the appraisal contingency, you cannot cancel because of the appraisal.
Yeah, this is not a change in how to do business. This is a change in how it's presented, and this is making more clear what it's already said. And my belief is that it's in here twice. One of them is in bold. The repercussions are spelled out. So the game is being played statewide, and their DRE car, everybody's getting complaints. And so they've now decided they are
Complaints,
going to make it
lawsuits.
painfully clear as to how the separation of appraisal and loan contingencies. As Demetra said, though, this is not any different. The language has been there. We're just making it extra
Crystal
clear.
clear, yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
Of course.
May I have a question?
Yeah, I think we're done with this, but questions.
Yes. And we're not going to add any more.
So-
So we'll do some questions and then we'll get out of here in terms of this, and we'll pick up the RPA. Somebody make a note where we ended off.
I got it. I got it.
Okay.
Go
All
ahead.
right, go ahead.
Well, my question is that let's say we remove the appraisal contingency up front and the appraisal doesn't come up at the value, and the client says, okay, no worries, I'm gonna move forward and I'm gonna come up with the difference. But something happened and the lender said that we can't proceed the loan and we have the loan contingency.
That's a different story. You can cancel because you can't get the loan. If the
So
loan
we need to
contingency
show them
remains in
the
effect.
proof. We need to show the proof to the listing agent that that's the reason that we're not gonna move forward and we wanna back off.
Yeah, the lender would have to give a letter stating why they couldn't get the loan.
Yeah,
Right.
if you're getting out of the contract because you can't get the loan and your loan contingency is still in place, you're within the rules of the contract. If your client doesn't want to get the loan because the house doesn't appraise, then that's a different story, or potentially a different story. And
So
in all
still
of
there
this,
is a-
everybody, please be aware that you're not to give legal advice when it comes to these things. So at some point, if people are asking real hard questions about what this means and whether they're going to get their deposit and whether they're going to lose their deposit, things like that, you're going to make sure that your clients, whatever side you're on, are going to consult with a real estate attorney, because you are not going to give legal advice. Go ahead, sorry.
Right. No, that would be all. Thank you so much. I got it.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
Hi, I have one more question, if I may. So according to L1, and the loan now is 17 days. So let's say I change it to 21, like the old one. Do I have to change that also in the paragraph E1, where it says 17 days after acceptance on the bottom?
Oh, in E1, that is regarding FHA or VA loans. So with an FHA loan or a VA loan, there are oftentimes extra requirements, things that need to be done on the property or to prepare the property or whatever it may be. So in the grid, we're back up on page 1. If I'm not referencing the right spot, stop me, but on the grid, page 1, paragraph 3E1, where it talks about loan amount. And then in the bottom there, it says, if FHA or VA checked, deliver a list of vendor required repairs. And you have to do that. The default is within 17 days after acceptance. So that's not regarding specifically the loan contingency or the appraisal contingency. That would be extra specific things needed if it's an FHA loan or a VA loan.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Great question. Anyone else?
Good job. All right, so let's come back next on Friday at 11 o'clock.
Friday at 11,
For
I'll
the
see
rest
you
of the
all
contract.
here. Again, people are welcome to come to the training room if you want. Otherwise, we can do it on Zoom and we will pick up where we left off. If anyone reviews, is going back through this and finds other questions that they didn't ask, feel free to bring them to Friday's
Bring them
class.
on Friday. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.